Welcome back to Mark Holovitz's vlog, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Today we are going to do a little walk around on the F Type Jag. Now I find it suitable now to explain to you guys. Now I've owned the car for close to 6 months, and well, they always talk about the honeymoon time period when you own a car or a house or whatever. That honeymoon phase where everything is perfect and you don't even think about the negatives. And so I don't want to focus on the negatives because honestly, I would do this all over again. I really can't think of a better car, a more interesting car to buy in this price range. So I just thought it suitable to point out some of the things today that aren't necessarily perfect on the F Type R, or really it's for the most part the F Type, but I want to share that with you guys, what I've noticed within the 6 months of ownership. So the first thing is something that you've all heard about. I don't think there's any surprise here, and that is body panels. Now generally I would say fit and finish in this car is exceptionally well done. I have really no issues there anywhere except one spot. Let's take a look. Now you look at the hood and you can see, okay, it looks fine there, and you circle down, and then of course here, now the lines and the gaps, the panel gaps aren't ideal. I mean, look at that. You can actually see it's offset. Okay, fine. Then you move along this other side, whereas this one looks like it actually belongs. Then you move along, and that's kind of uneven distances. Then you look over here, and then it's a little tighter in here, you'll notice. This is almost like a Corvette C8 in terms of fit and finish on panel gaps. But you move along, and of course you have panel gap differences between this side and the other side of the car. What that is a result of really is essentially is this huge clamshell hood that pops up. I mean, that's something that you can't really do much about. I mean, you've got 3-4 dimensions going on there, and every time you open the hood and close it, it seems like those gaps shift from one side to the other. I've heard of people online often making many adjustments over the time, only to find it going out of whack here shortly thereafter. So I've sort of given up on that whole concept, to be honest. Other than that, the panel gaps on the rest of the car are actually pretty good. One other little gap that I've noticed, if you circle around to the back of the car, sometimes the gaps around the hood or around the spoiler are a little bit different from one side to the other. Just out a little bit. I mean, not enough to be a significant issue, but I sometimes notice a slight deviation from one side to the other. That's really all I notice on panel gaps. But since we're talking about fit and finish and quality, let's point out another thing. Now, as we look down here and we look at, this has kind of got some movement in there. And again, I see the same thing goes on the other side here. When you give it a little push, you'll notice there's a little bit of flex in there. That means there's a lot of hollow space in there, and it's fastened okay, but it just seems like there's a pretty good extensive use of a lot of plastics down here that aren't necessarily fully supported. But again, it's not a significant issue. Nothing's hanging off. I mean, even here when we talk about panel gaps, you'll notice this right here. Look at that. You see? See? Right there. So again, not major issues. And I guess it goes in line with relatively modest production numbers, but that's something that I've noticed. So in terms of fit and finish, things are generally pretty good. But if you're expecting a Porsche 911 levels of fit and finish, I think you'll be slightly disappointed, but that's okay. You'll find things like that when you buy Italian cars and some of the low production number cars out there. There's often fit and finish quality issues that people just tend to live with, and that's part of the charm of these cars. Now, the next issue that I've had since I've owned the car, and again, it's been about 6 months, has to do with the windshield. And if you saw a previous video of mine, you know I actually had to get the windshield repaired. Actually, it turns out I had a crack or two developing because of a small little chip, and I think that's more of a product of my environment. So you can't blame the car, and honestly, there's no issue with the car in that sense. The issue comes with the fact that these windshields are not jobber available. So in other words, you've got to pay the piper. You got to go straight back to a JLR group, support a dealership or network. In other words, go back to the dealership you bought the car from, get them to install a glass at their asked for price. I mean, they really call the shots. They're going to charge you $2,000 for a windshield, and then you can't even take it anywhere. They have their own specific equipment that they have to use to set up and calibrate all your sensors, because there's all kinds of sensors. You've got humidity sensors and all your other sensors that are somehow tied into the glass and the windshield, that if you don't get them properly calibrated, in theory, it doesn't necessarily work 100%. So the dealer controls that. Whereas owning a BMW, like this, sometimes what that means is you can go aftermarket. I can get a windshield for this car for $180 Canadian. And this one here, these guys are charging, well, $2,000 for the glass, and they say $600 for install and calibration. So you're stuck. You can't avoid that. That's just what they're charging you. So that's what I found, is that you're sort of snookered. And I suspect the same thing applies for these roofs right here. Being it's a glass panel, it's going to be the same situation. There is no aftermarket for that. So before we go for a drive, I want to share a couple more things. First of all, the app on the phone that you install, it's Jaguar Control. It's a great app. I'm not going to walk you through that today, but what it is an app, and you can start it remotely. You can start your car from a mile away or 10 feet away. It doesn't matter. You can start it. You know where you've got GPS tracking. It's a great app. The only thing is with that app, I found sometimes it glitches out, and there's a lot of times I open my phone, open the app, and then it just won't react. It won't let me do a car start if it's been a long time since I've driven a car. So if I haven't driven a car for about, say, 2 weeks, and then I go to try to activate the app, it won't let me do that. I've actually got to come into the car myself personally, start it with the push button and the key in its proximity, and then it'll let me actually take off and drive. And then after that, the app's working again. So there's some sort of glitch. I don't know if it's in the app or in the signal that comes from the car. I don't know what that is, but that's a little bit of a glitch that I've noticed. Not a big deal. Another thing I'll point out too is the mirror. The mirror as well as the door handle. Now they're both great. It works awesome. Now every time you toggle a button like this, you hit unlock. You know, you basically go to open the car. It works great. Door handle opens, as you can see, because it's normally a shaved type of door handle almost, so it pops out and the mirror pops out. Now, the only thing I'm a little skeptical about this whole situation is, unfortunately, with age, those are moving parts. You've got mirrors and door handles that are opening and closing every single time you just want to get in the car. What if you want to go in the car to grab a piece of paper or some work? You just in and out a few times in a given day, you're adding extra wear and tear. Do you know, as engineers create X amount of, or design X amount of operations in any given switch? Doesn't matter if it's your DVD control remote, or whether it's your cell phone, or whether it's a control in your car. Every single switch, device, button has a fixed number of operations. What is it? 10,000? 100,000? Not sure. We'll find out. But I do know on the forums, there's already people talking about those door handles becoming problematic, maybe the mirrors in certain cases. So if I could do this, what I'd like to do is either code out, and maybe there's a way to do that. I'll let you know if I figure that out. But I'd like the mirrors to actually stay open, engaged. The door handle, it's kind of a nice security feature, so I would leave that alone. To be honest, I don't really have an issue with that. I guess that's just no other way around it. But I mean, every time there's an operation, there's a little electric motor in there, and that wears. And there's also hinges in there constantly moving around. So I can't help but think you're gonna have more squeaks and rattles and electric motors wearing. I mean, simplicity sometimes is key. Now, it's a Jag. The idea is luxury, comfort levels. But I do know those are things that are potentially wear items. So let's go inside the car now and see what else I found inside that isn't so great. Let's go. So one thing I noticed about driving, now I would say because this has the 8-speed ZF Auto, it actually does a great job, especially when you put it in dynamic mode, you start pulling gears. It does an awesome job. There is one thing though that I found sometimes awkward. I'm driving along in, say, first gear, and then I want to dip into the throttle. Instead of it gunning, it'll all of a sudden do a quick upshift to second, and it'll feel like a slug. Or I'll be in second, and it'll quickly upshift to third. It feels like it's sort of flat-footed at that point, and then it has to build up a little bit of momentum. So I don't know what it is. It's the tuning, or maybe it's the way I'm driving it. Maybe that's part of it. Is like I said, it just feels a little off kilter once in a while. It's not slipping or missing. I mean, it drives perfect. There's no issue there. It just seems it has a strange behavior of where I'm coasting, quarter throttle, and I get on it. You expect it to kind of like either stay in the gear or downshift, but instead it seems to sometimes upshift, and it kind of feels a little weird, right? Again, if you put it in manual mode, no problems. And often if you time it right, it won't do that, but it just seems sometimes where you do one of those unexpected tip-ins. So again, maybe it's my behavior. But anyway, I found that as being a little bit awkward, again, with the ZF Auto. So I would suggest, like, obviously if you're driving it in a spirited fashion at the track or what have you, you definitely want to be driving it more in the sport mode or automatic or manual mode so that it's not catching you off guard with those weird off kind of shifts. So anyway, that's something that I also noticed. Down here as well, I want to point out, and can I point out down here, this little mode is also a pain. This is the auto shut off, start stop. So when you're in regular mode, default mode, this is on like that. That means it's going to stop at a set of lights or what have you. That's fine, I get it. That's what the system is made to do, save fuel, save the environment. But one thing I notice, if I'm driving forward, typical, you come up to a red light, it shuts off the car. That's okay, I get it. I'm not loving it, but I get it. Sometimes where I park, often during the day, I'll pull ahead and then go to back into my parking stall. And I find what it ends up doing is, as I pull ahead and I go to put it in reverse, the car will shut off. And now as I off the brake, it'll start up again, just because I'm going in reverse to park the car. To me, that sounds like it's not really something you want it to do. I mean, after all, you're parking the car. Why would you want it to shut off to save fuel? All you're doing is that transition. So I don't know if these manufacturers can come up with a better way to sort of sense. Probably not. But that's something that I find a little bit awkward as well, is that auto shut off. I never have liked them on any car. It's never a feature that I've ever liked. As a matter of fact, I always shut it off pretty much when I get in the car. 2 buttons I press when I get in the car. I start it up and I hit this button to turn it off, and then I hit this button to give me the exhaust sounds. Those are the 2 buttons I hit every time, and I do that because that's the way these cars should be driven. Either that or just put it straight in dynamic mode. You get full exhaust sound off idle. You get exhaust sound all the time. You get the red gauges. It's a beautiful thing. But again, if you're not driving in full dynamic mode, those are the 2 buttons I always set off. So it's that stop-start system is kind of bogus too. Again, not unique for these Jags, but it's just more of an industry standard now. And another thing that I find really kind of awkward with these cars, and it just goes with the profile, so it's not really a big thing, because overall the ride height is great in these cars, but it's being able to see out the front windshield when you're at a set of lights. Often the lights, here's me looking out the windshield, and often the lights overhead, the traffic lights, you can't see. So if I'm sitting like this, and even worse, if I've got this down because of the sun, that's what you see. That's what I'm looking out right now with the visor down. If I'm trying to keep the sun out of my eyes, this is literally at my eye height. This is what I'm looking at. So the visibility is very minuscule at best. So again, it's part and parcel to this driving this sort of car and the low profile effect. But that's something that just takes a little getting used to. Flip this little guy up and it gives you a little better visibility. So another little nickel and dime thing. It's really not that big of a thing, but thought I'd point it out for those of you who are maybe shopping for an F-Type and don't necessarily have one yet, and you wonder all these little niggly things, and that's what this is just a minor little thing. I would imagine it being a much more exaggerated with the convertible, because the convertible, you have lots of sunlight. As you do here, I've got the panoramic glass, but convertible would be even worse. And that is looking at your gauges. These are your heater controls right here. And it looks okay in video, but let me tell you, when you've got shining down on these controls, this isn't bad. This here you can see. But here, when you're trying to use, you want to go, obviously you've got cooled seats, heated seats. So if you want to go one way or the other, okay, that's easy to see. But sometimes you go overboard and you go the other way. It's easy to see here. But honestly, when you've got sunlight, I'm sitting out in the shade right now, as you can see. It's a shady day out here. So it's easy to kind of see these. But I'm only giving you as an example. This is actually very difficult to see because it's a high shine plastic, and often you can't even see these, the blue or the red, or you can't tell if you've gone overboard or underboard, or it's the worst is if you're right in here, you think you're turning, you've got your heated seats on, and then you're going and you think you shut it off and you're actually one over here. Sometimes you really can't even see those until you go all the way. So I just find it's very difficult to kind of see, especially like when you get glare, like you can see right there, there's absolutely total glare, and that's what it's like when the sun's shining in on a sunshiny kind of an afternoon. It becomes very, very difficult to see these. So to be honest, the finish, it looks great, it's high quality and stuff, and it's actually very nice to operate, but the problem is actually just the visibility. That was something I noticed since day one. The rest of these controls are amazing. I love them. Very high quality feel. This is a kind of a rubberized texture, a little bit knurled in there, if you will. So that looks really, really high quality. You've got this high gloss black finish throughout. including around here. So it's very, very nice. But it's just that one thing right there. I noticed that can be a bit of a sore spot there trying to see as you look right there. So guys, trust me when I say I'm just trying to point out some of the silly little things, because this car is so amazing. The question, would I do this again? 100%. I can't think of a more interesting, cooler, better car for the money with this level of performance, look, style, sex appeal. It is just ridiculous. And honestly, I would recommend these cars to anybody who wants something unique. These are just little things just to consider if you're looking at buying one of these F-Types. I mean, it's just, they're minor issues for the big scheme of things, but just something to consider. Overall, I would absolutely do it again in a heartbeat. There's really nothing else I would replace this with right now. I mean, as I mentioned in previous videos, there were some other cars that I considered buying before this, but now that I've bought this, I'm glad I've made this move, and I can't think of any car at this time that I would rather have as kind of that daily, a toy, something you can polish, have fun, but maybe use every day. It's got all-wheel drive, so I mean, you can use it in garbage weather that we get up here in Canada, a lot of northern states as well as Eastern Europe. You know, all over the world, there's places that have garbage weather conditions, and the all-wheel drive works great. Now, it's taken some of the edge off versus the original Type R with the rear-wheel drive. Of course, that was a beast, but trust me when I say you're not lacking for performance, and actually this really puts it down better than the rear-wheel drive cars. This is amazing car. Why do you think the brand new F Type R has such minimal changes? All he did was the headlights and put a digital display in there. The rest is identical. That's because these cars are just so very, very good that why fix what's not broken, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's sort of the adage. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I just wanted to share with you my sort of 6-month summary, some of the little nickel and dime things that are kind of eating away at me, but again, very, very minor, and I would absolutely buy this car again in a heartbeat. Had I known all those little things, and some of them I knew already beforehand, but I had to live with them every single day, that wouldn't have deterred me. This car is just so good. Thanks again, everybody. Hope to see you guys in the next one. Catch you real soon. Bye-bye.